Thank you so much for attending my PowerPoint presentation on the weirdest Fallout vaults. First up is Vault 101. Vault 101 was designed to never open. Not for 10 years, not for 100 years. Never. The experiment here was to study the role of the overseer when a vault remained sealed indefinitely, which is exactly the kind of riveting social science you'd expect from people who thought nuclear war was a research opportunity. Residents believed they were in a standard control vault, living normal underground lives, completely unaware that their entire existence was designed to answer the question, what happens when you give one person absolute power in a box that never opens? What happens is precisely what you'd expect. The overseer became a dictator. Shocking, I know. The vault developed a mantra that really captures the spirit of the place. We are born in the vault, we live in the vault, and we die in the vault. Truly inspiring stuff. The GOAT exam, which was supposed to determine your career path, had questions that were less about aptitude and more about demonstrating the overseer's control over every aspect of your life. The experiment failed multiple times because people kept wanting to leave. The second overseer did his job perfectly, but eventually, overseers started allowing outside contact, and residents kept escaping to see literally anything else. By 2277, Overseer Almodovar ran the place as a police state, which finally prompted James to escape with his teenage kid in tow, leaving his daughter Amada to lead a rebel faction. Vault 101 proves that Vault-Tec's most boring experiment was also their most predictable. Congratulations, you discovered authoritarianism. Next up is Vault 68 and 69. Vault 68 and 69 had the same experiment, but were polar opposites of each other, which is the kind of symmetry Vault-Tec loved. Vault 68 housed 999 men and 1 woman. Vault 69 housed 999 women and 1 man. The goal was to study extreme gender imbalance and the resulting social dynamics, which is corporate speak for let's see what happens when we create the most uncomfortable situation possible. Now, if you're thinking this sounds appealing at first, you're exactly the kind of person Vault-Tec was counting on. The reality of being the sole member of your sex amongst 1,000 others is not a fantasy. It's a nightmare. If the only way of continuing civilization rests entirely on you, congratulations. You've just become the most pressured individual in human history. The expectations, the dynamics, the sheer psychological weight of that situation would be absolutely devastating. Both vaults remain undiscovered, which frankly is probably for the best. Their locations are unknown, and we have no records of what actually happened inside. Did they thrive? Did they collapse immediately? Did the lone individuals survive the experience, or did the social pressure destroy them? We'll likely never know. What we do know is that Vault-Tec looked at the concept of gender ratios and decided the most scientific approach was to make them as extreme as physically possible. Not 60 to 40, not 70 to 30. No, they went with 999 to 1 because subtlety was never their strong suit. It's a straightforward experiment with dark implications, more cruel than truly bizarre. Next is Vault 108. Vault 108 housed 475 occupants and was designed to study conflict over leadership and power. To ensure this conflict would actually happen, Vault-Tec gave the vault an overseer with terminal cancer who had 40 months to live, then programmed the power to fail after 20 years despite the experiment lasting 38 years. They also overstocked the armory by triple the normal amount, because when you're engineering a civil war, you want to make sure everyone's well armed. The plan worked exactly as intended. A brutal civil war broke out over who would succeed the dying overseer, and the population was devastated. The survivors now faced a critical problem. Their numbers were too low to sustain the vault, so they came up with a solution that I'm sure seemed reasonable at the time. They decided to clone someone. They chose a man named Gary. They cloned him repeatedly, documenting each iteration. The first few Gary clones seemed fine, but as they continued, they noticed each Gary was becoming progressively more hostile toward anyone who wasn't a Gary clone. By the 53rd Gary, they realized there were no significant differences between clones, and they were running out of space. Some dwellers took Garys out and killed them to make room. Then they made Gary 54. Gary 54 attacked Dr. Peterson during examination. After that, the Gary clones rebelled and systematically killed every non-Gary in the vault. By 2277, Vault 108 is completely overrun by Gary clones. They're all hostile, they're all identical, and they've lost all capacity for human communication except for one word, Gary. If you venture into this vault, the last thing you'll hear before you die is 100 identical men screaming Gary at you. Congratulations on your solution to population decline. Truly innovative. Next up is Vault 106. Vault 106 was constructed in just 5 years and housed 107 occupants, 195 test subjects, and 12 researchers from Vault-Tec. The experiment was straightforward: pump psychoactive drugs into the ventilation system 10 days after the vault sealed, then observe what happens. The residents were not informed about this. The experiment was designed to last 12 years and 3 months, which seems oddly specific until you realize they were probably just calculating how long it would take for everyone to kill each other. On day 10, At precisely 15:30 hours, the drugs were released into circulation. Residents who complained that something felt wrong were told everything was fine, which is exactly what you want to hear when you're starting to hallucinate. Initially, the drugs caused extreme relaxation. Some dwellers fell into near comatose states. Then the aggression started. The overseer knew this was coming. He'd prepared security protocols, activated specific ventilation shafts, disconnected others, implemented camera protocols, all very official, all completely useless. The security team couldn't handle the highly aggressive individuals who were now seeing things that weren't there and attacking everyone in their way. Most of the vault dwellers died violently. Here's the impressive part. Over 200 years later, Vault 106 is still pumping out psychoactive compounds. A purple haze filters through this collapsing structure, and if you enter, you will hallucinate. You'll see things that aren't there. You'll also be attacked by things that are there, because this vault is still home to whatever's left of the original residents, all of them completely insane. Vault Tech's approach to studying psychosis: just add drugs and wait. The foundations are literally collapsing, and it's still a functional nightmare. Extraordinary, I know. Moving on to Vault 95. Vault 95 was designed to house 72 recovering addicts in a rehabilitation program. They held daily meetings, support groups, and the overseer functioned as their therapist, a position of support and servitude rather than authority. For 5 years, this program worked. The vault dwellers became clean. They built a community, a family. They thought they'd been given a second chance at life, free from the substances that had destroyed them. What they didn't know was that one of them, a man named Gutierrez, was an undercover Vault Tech agent. Not even the overseer knew. Gutierrez had a rehearsed backstory, a fake addiction history, and strict instructions. After exactly 5 years, open the hidden compartment. On the 5th anniversary, Gutierrez unlocked a storage unit built into the wall. Inside was what residents described as a lifetime's worth of chems and booze, laid out like a freaking department store window display. This was part 2 of the experiment: reintroduce addictive stimuli to a recovered population and document what happens. What happened was immediate collapse. Residents scrambled for the chems. Fighting broke out. People retreated to their rooms with personal stashes, and when they ran out, they ventured back for more. As the supply dwindled, they turned on each other. The family they'd built over 5 years now, killing each other for one more high. J. Scott's Terminal chronicles the descent. First entry: heartbroken that the family's breaking. Second, hearing gunshots, wondering how they recover from killing each other. Third, his willpower is crumbling. Final entry: I don't care about the program. I'm going out to be with my friends. They found his skeleton in his room. Everyone died. Gutierrez died too, which means he never even got to record the results of the experiment he'd spent 5 years preparing. By 2287, the gunners had moved in. Vault Tech proved that recovery from addiction works when there's no temptation, then proved that reintroducing temptation destroys everything. 5 years of hope undone in days. Truly groundbreaking research. Next is Vault 4. Vault 4 was run by Overseer Lloyd Hawthorne and his wife Cassandra, who had a vision for humanity's future. If radiation was the problem, why not just make humans who could tolerate it? Their solution was to hybridize humans with radiation-resistant species through genetic engineering. Women were impregnated with genetically engineered embryos designed to create radiation-resistant offspring. One test subject, Peter, was allegedly turned into a gulper directly, though the exact process remains unclear. The experiment did produce results. The gulpers were born. Then they immediately consumed their surrogate mothers from the inside out, because of course they did. These creatures, human salamander hybrids, with pale skin, human eyes, and mouths filled with human fingers, escaped into the vault and eventually made their way to fresh water on the surface, where they continue to terrorize the wasteland to this day. The test subjects rebelled. They killed Hawthorne, Cassandra, and every scientist in the vault. In Hawthorne's final log entry, as his life's work literally tears him apart, he insists that hybridizing humans with radioactive resistant species still has potential. Truly inspiring commitment to the scientific method. The surviving victims cryogenically froze the women who were already pregnant to save them from being consumed, then took over the vault. Their descendants inherited various mutations: cyclopes, extra body parts, bioluminescence, but they built a functioning democratic society anyway. They even take in refugees from the surface, like the survivors of Shady Sands. Level 12 remains off limits. Down there, you'll find the experiment labs, the cryopods with pregnant women, still frozen, and specimen tanks containing the gulpers that started it all. The victims of Vault Tech's experiments now run the vault better than the scientists ever did, which says everything you need to know about unregulated scientific control. Vault Tech's solution to radiation was to turn humans into monsters. The monsters won. Next is Vault 22. Vault 22 was exclusively staffed by scientists whose mission was to study food production for the post-war world. They experimented with crops that responded to artificial light, bred mantises to hunt pests, and cultivated genetically modified Venus flytraps. For nearly 20 years, they successfully fed themselves and made genuine progress toward rebuilding agriculture. Then, in 2095, they decided to use a special gift they'd received from a defense contractor, Beauveria mordicana, a fungus developed at the X-22 Botanical Garden. This fungus was designed for pest control. When a pest is exposed to the spores, the fungus colonizes the body, kills the host due to organ failure, then reanimates the corpse to spread more spores to the next target. Someone at Vault-Tec received this murder fungus and thought, yes, this will help us grow corn. The scientists noted that while effective, the fungus took 10 to 20 days to kill its prey, which they found disappointing. They continued using it. The spores escaped through air ducts into the caves behind the vault. Security was sent to investigate. Dr. Harrison Peters was infected. The scientists isolated Peters and watched as the fungus colonized his lungs, killed him, then reanimated his corpse. They were somehow surprised when this spread to others. The spores infected the entire population. Residents died. The fungus reanimated them as spore carriers, fungal zombies that blend with the plant life and ambush prey. By 2096, only 118 survivors made it out, fleeing to Zion Canyon. The rest merged with the ecosystem. 200 years later, Vault 22 remains a nightmare. Spore carriers still hunt through the vegetation. The giant mantises roam freely. The Venus flytraps have grown to monstrous sizes. Eventually, a scientist named Keeley pumps the vault full of flammable gas and sets it on fire to prevent the spores from spreading further. Vault 22 wanted to feed humanity. Instead, they created The Last of Us, except with less compelling storytelling and more preventable stupidity. If anyone had questioned why they were using corpse reanimating fungus on their food supply, this could have been avoided. Next is Vault 77. Vault 77 was Vault-Tec's most efficient experiment. One vault, one person, one crate of puppets. The goal was to study the effects of prolonged isolation, which apparently required exactly one test subject, and a box labeled P13-EXUS government issue puppet ration. For 1 year, 3 months, and 12 days. This man lived completely alone. He spent most of his time by the vault door, waiting for it to open, slowly losing his mind. Then he discovered the crate. Inside were puppets, a dog, a king, an old woman, and others. At first, he used them as simple entertainment, giving them names and personalities. But over time, something changed. The puppets started talking to him naturally. He stopped performing the voices. They just spoke. One puppet, Vault Boy, had been left at the bottom of the crate. When the man finally found him, Vault Boy told him something interesting. They had killed the king puppet together. They were both criminals now. They should leave the vault. So they did. The man and Vault Boy roamed the wasteland on a Brahmin. At some point, they were captured by slavers. The slavers didn't believe his story about the puppet. Then, suddenly, the vault dweller and his puppet massacred every slaver in the area. The warning spread across the wasteland. Beware the puppet man. Years later, a Vault 77 jumpsuit was found at Paradise Falls with a holotape that simply reads, "Burn this jumpsuit." The slavers there know the reputation. They're terrified of the suit itself, which suggests the puppet man's legend is very, very real. Where he is now, no one knows. Still alive with his puppet companion, wandering West Virginia. Continuing his murder spree on the puppet's command, we may never find out. Vault-Tec's experiment on isolation produced a paranoid schizophrenic who takes orders from a hand puppet and is genuinely one of the most feared individuals in the wasteland. When your survival plan's most successful component is a box of puppets, you've achieved something truly special. Next is Vault 112. Vault 112 housed 85 occupants in virtual reality pods indefinitely, all under the complete control of Dr. Stanislaus Braun, the man who created the Garden of Eden creation kit, one of the most important pieces of technology for rebuilding civilization. With that impressive resume, Braun decided the best use of his genius was to torture 85 people for 200 years. The residents were hooked into VR simulations, where Braun had absolute control. He would create utopias, let them settle in, then torture and kill them for his amusement. Then he'd reset the simulation and do it again. The residents don't remember their deaths between resets, which means they experience the terror fresh every single time. Braun documented his experiments thoroughly. After one simulation, he wrote, "I'm tired of the beating sun and the ceaseless pounding of the lagoon's waves. I no longer take pleasure in watching Simpson wither away from scurvy." 23 years in the Swiss Alps was apparently long enough. Time for something more domestic. His current simulation is called Tranquility Lane, a 1950s suburban American neighborhood where Braun appears as a little girl named Betty. He forces residents to perform psychological torture on each other, killing, humiliating, destroying their relationships, all for his entertainment. They can't die permanently. They can't escape. They can't even remember why they feel so afraid. A failsafe exists, the Chinese invasion program. Activate it, and simulation deaths become real deaths. But Braun designed his own safety protocols so he can't be killed from within the simulation. He'd murder everyone and be trapped alone forever, which is the only thing he fears. When you find Vault 112, James, the lone wanderer's father, is trapped inside. Your options are simple. Activate the failsafe and kill everyone to free them, or help Betty with her sadistic games and leave them in hell. If you somehow removed Braun from his pod, his 200-year-old body would shrivel to dust. Vault-Tec gave a sadist immortality and 85 playthings. Braun calls this his greatest achievement. 200 years of dying repeatedly in American suburbs. Truly inspiring work, Doctor. Groundbreaking research on being a dick forever. And finally, we arrive at Vault 11. Vault 11 was told that every year they must sacrifice one person, or the entire vault would be exterminated. This was a lie. The actual experiment was to see if people would refuse an inhumane order from an authority when their lives were threatened. If they had simply said no from the beginning, everyone would have walked free. They did not say no. The first overseer was the only person who knew about the experiment. When the residents discovered what was happening, they immediately executed him. Then they decided that every overseer would be the annual sacrifice, combining the elections into one efficient murder lottery. Every year, they'd vote for a new overseer, and at the end of the year, that person would be killed. What followed was 18 years of corruption that would make any politician proud. Voting blocks formed, the Justice Bloc, the Humanity Dignity Bloc, and elections became rigged through bribery, extortion, and drug trafficking. Propaganda covered the walls. Don't vote Glover. His family needs him. Haley is a known adulterer and communist sympathizer. Democracy had been weaponized into a murder lottery, and they were all complicit. Catherine Stone's husband was nominated by the Justice Bloc. In response, Catherine stalked and murdered Justice Bloc members, one by one, until she was caught. She confessed, was elected overseer for her crimes, then passed Order 745. The Vault computer would now select sacrifices randomly instead of through voting. The Justice Bloc started a revolution. They armed themselves, took the reactor hostage, and demanded the old system back. Civil war broke out. When the gunfire stopped, 475 residents had been reduced to 5 survivors. Those 5 survivors looked at each other and decided they were done. They refused to nominate anyone. If the Vault wanted to kill them, it could go ahead. The Vault's cheerful voice responded, "Congratulations, citizens of Vault 11. You have made the decision not to sacrifice one of your own. You can walk with your head held high, knowing that your commitment to human life is a shining example to us all. The door is now open. It was a test. It had always been a test." 18 years of sacrifices, corruption, and murder were completely unnecessary. Had they refused from day one, everyone would have lived. 4 of the 5 survivors committed suicide from guilt. 1 walked away. On the holotape they left behind, you can hear them arguing, "We made the right decision, but we did it too late." Vault-Tec asked the question, will humans kill each other if an authority threatens them? The answer was yes, enthusiastically, for decades, turning democracy itself into a weapon. Only when almost everyone was dead did the survivors finally refuse. Congratulations, you failed at the part explicitly designed to see if you'd fail. Truly, a shining example to us all. In conclusion, Vault-Tec's experiments reveal that humanity will commit any atrocity if given the right incentives and the wrong leadership, and you should absolutely play them. If you enjoyed this PowerPoint presentation, I made others, and you should absolutely check them out. Peace on planet Earth.